Okay, man, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Now, come on, now crank this motherfucker up.
Break it down like this.
Hello, Internet. Gino, that Pinguino Greco here again with another episode of Deep Listens. And today we are going to talk about G-strings. I'm kidding. We're talking about G-string, the game, not the underwear type. And joining me, as always, to discuss video games, I'm joined by Pete Busby. Hello, Pete.
Hey, what's going on? I feel a little underprepared. I thought this was about the underwear, but I'll do my best anyway. This week's fun fact is about the humble cone snail. I know.
What a deadly snail.
I know. Everybody's favorite cone and favorite snail.
Did we learn about this one recently, or did it come up somewhere else?
I don't remember.
We have not discussed it.
I think I was talking to someone about this, actually, fairly recently.
Nice.
Tell us.
Look, we have our finger on the pulse of cone snail news.
Yeah.
Now I got to check. So this is actually from 2014. So, we're definitely on the pulse. This is from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the U.S. of A. So it's legit. But their cone snail actually super deadly. One of the deadliest, most venomous animals in the world. But a very interesting thing the cone snail does is that when it's hunting fish, this certain species, what it does is it releases a cloud of insulin, and then the fish swim through this specialized insulin cloud and go into hypoglycemic shock and just sort of freeze. Then this cone snail uses its big net tongue, I'll call it, to catch the fish, pull them in, and apply one of 200 different neurotoxins. Now, all this is pretty cool, but it's even cooler to note that cone snails are the only other animals we know of who basically use insulin like we do. Lots of animals have insulin, but cone snails and us are the only ones who sort of use it for other stuff. Very cool.
Well, yeah, they use it just like we do to paralyze fish and capture them.
Exactly. The only useful application of insulin that I know of.
Mm-hmm.
So can we, is that how we make insulin artificially with cone snails?
No, I think we used to do it with horses.
You don't want to fuck with cone snails.
I know.
Or pigs? We used to get it from animals, but now we have a synthetic version. I'll put it that way.
Okay. I just think it would be very funny if, the farmers of insulin were using cone snails and just, releasing fish so that they would release the insulin. Just go back to, really rudimentary farming techniques.
Sucking it out of the water. Quick PSA from the good people at Good Listens. If you ever find a conical shell, don't put it in your pocket. 30 people die every year from cone snail venom.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Well,
the cone snail has a harpoon as its, injection thing, and all of them are unique as far as their poison makeup is. So, if you get stung by one, they might be able to help you, but probably not because it's 200 different poisons.
Wow.
So good luck to you if you fall victim to that.
Boy, I did not realize. I assumed that one neurotoxin was enough, but that clearly not. The random dice rolls of neurotoxins.
Oh, you sweet summer child, you.
That other voice you hear is M. Palladino, our other co-host. Hello, M. How's it going?
Hello. I'm so tired. My sleep schedule is not very good right now. I've been up for a while, so if you hear me snoring, I'll edit it out in post. And no, you didn't.
If you hear me snoring, please email in. We can fix it and re-release it so that other future listeners do not hear the snoring.
I'm the one who has to edit the show, so hopefully I'll find all of it.
Before we get into talking about G-String, the Half-Life 2 mod turned full release that was 10 plus years in development, our normal plugs. You can get in touch with the show at deeplistenspod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. And you can also support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens. Before we do the little Discord report, just a little word about the Twitter account at deeplistenspod. We are now pushing notifications on when this show gets uploaded to there. So you will have the up-to-date update of when this thing goes up. So go ahead, give it a follow if you want, a little bit more notice if your RSS feed doesn't automatically update or something. So without further ado, if you were to support us on Patreon, you could be on the Discord report.
The Discord report. Boop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop. This week on the Discord report, let's see. I had some things. Let me find them. What's going on in the Discord?
Apparently there was good wrestling.
Was there?
I don't know.
Like WWE or Greco-Roman? What are we talking here?
Probably WWE or AEW or something. There were people in there saying good things about wrestling, and I don't know anything about it, but for our wrestling listeners, apparently y'all had a good time.
Yep. Mr. CM Punk has returned. I don't know what that
He's
means.
back?
Yeah.
He was a wrestler for a while. He left to go do MMA, got his ass kicked real hard, and I guess now he's back.
Ah. Okay.
Yeah, he was more of a showman than a violence purveyor.
I see. Sometimes people make the switch, like Ronda Rousey went from... Was she...
She was MMA
first.
She was MMA first, yeah, then
Yeah.
did wrestling. Brock Lesnar went the other way.
Yeah.
He was WWE and then went to MMA. He did pretty good, too. He was heavyweight champ for a bit.
Yeah.
Yep.
Brock Lesnar, his talent is bigness.
Mhm.
And
All of those big guys, like if you get into the heavyweight division, they're just very large and they try to hit you very hard. And if they end up going more than, a couple of hits, they're just heavy guys leaning against each other, trying to catch their breath.
yeah, so that worked out for him, and I think Ronda Rousey was very good, and then people figured out she had one good move, and then
Yep.
figured it out, and that was the end of her MMA dominance. If I
Yeah.
remember correctly.
Yep, and then she was in Fast and Furious movies.
Yep.
Mm. Other than that, there's all I'm seeing are memes of Batman talking to Parappa the Rapper
Yes.
about his parents dying, and then Parappa responds with, "This is where your parents died," in his Parappa voice.
It's great.
Yeah. Also, people are taking a horse dewormer, and there were a lot of memes about that going on in Discord, because that sure is a thing that's happening now.
Yeah, the Parappa the Rapper is so good. This is where I watched my parents die, Parappa. This is where you watched your parents die. Oh. Oops.
Yeah. Did we ever play a Parappa the Rapper game?
We have not. At some point we should. Or Guitaru Man.
Is there another one?
Guitaru
a
Man is from
guitar
the
version?
same developer, but it's a guitar-based thing. I don't think it uses the Rock Band guitars, if I remember correctly, but it is a similar sort of deal. But yeah, that I think does sum up everything that's been going on in the Discord. I guess there's more Magic stuff. They announced the next year plus of Magic the Gathering content, and it made us sad. It made me sad.
Did they announce all of them? I didn't know they did the full spread.
Nothing for the new set, the new Innistrad Midnight Hunt, but they have released information about the upcoming sets. So they're doing a cyberpunk Japanese set coming up, set in Kamigawa, which was a set from my childhood. And
Cyberpunk's really taken over.
Yes. They're doing a cyberpunk Magic the Gathering set, because when I think of cyberpunk, I think of high fantasy card game. But yeah, Kamigawa was a set that was supposed to be like Shintoism, like Japanese folklore, and now they're just like, what if it was the future of that world? And it's cyberpunk, because all cyberpunk stuff's Japanese, and we'll get into that with the game we're talking about today at some point. They also have a Lord of the Rings set that is coming out that will be modern legal.
God, what were the actual Lord of the Rings?
Like actual fucking Lord of the Rings. Like there'll be
what
a
could
Gandalf the Grey.
IP costs have possibly been for that?
I have no clue. That's happening. There's going to be a Warhammer 40k Commander set.
Yeah.
So you can play your Warhammer cards, and I hope there's a fucking Warhammer card that ends up being legacy playable, and we have to hear about it forever. Just salt the earth with this game. And someone did ask if I could rant about my opinion on Magic. I'm not going to do another podcast of Magic as long as it makes me sad, but I'll do it here. Magic's increasing desperation is becoming upsetting. They're making a Street Fighter hidden secret lair. They're making there was another secret lair that was like ridiculous as well.
Let's see.
What are secret lairs?
Secret lairs are direct to consumer products that they're selling that basically they're limited edition and limited time releases. They'll like announce it on the WotC site. It'll be up for like a week, and whoever gets it gets it.
Yeah.
And then that's it. But for secret lairs up until now, they have generally been most of the time they are reprints of existing cards with guest artists. So like they did a death metal secret lair where like all the cards were done by kind of death metal inspired artists for an upcoming set that was Norse themed. So they kind of leaned into that.
That sounds cool. I'm glad they ruined it.
That sounds cool. And then they've done some where they make new cards using IPs. Mm-hmm. And those are worse. Like they did a Walking Dead one from a year ago.
Yes, that was the one I was going to bring up, which everyone was like, this seems like a slippery slope. And now here we are.
Yeah, they're doing Street Fighter.
And just so we saved the best for last, there's also going to be a Fortnite one.
That was the one.
Yep.
That was the one where I was like...
I think you blocked that out because it was so terrible.
So the Fortnite one is apparently going to not have new cards. It's going to be existing cards redone in the art style, the iconic art style of Fortnite, which Fortnite is basically Epic ripping off other games as fast as humanly possible because they have all the money in the world. Their look rips off Blizzard art, like it looks like Overwatch. The gameplay ripped off most Battle Royale games, most prominently PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. They are continuing, like they made some sort of Among Us variant. Like basically whenever a smaller developer comes up with a mode, Fortnite just gobbles it up. And also Fortnite apparently has a Martin Luther King experience right now.
Yeah.
So, what the fuck?
Yeah. They wanted to teach some historical things as part of their like multiverse whatever. So they like will send your Rick Sanchez avatar to Washington to watch Martin Luther King give a speech, and it's as bizarre as it sounds.
Yeah, the game with the Banana Man avatar is where you want your Martin Luther King Jr. History speech. Yeah.
That'll probably solve racism. I'm glad we're taking care of that.
Yeah, exactly. They tried something like this before, and when like all the Black Lives Matter things were happening at the beginning of last year, and they had emotes that were, some would say, questionable, and people would just do that whenever there was this big event. And so now they have banned the emotes in these game modes. Great. But that does not stop people from
being Rick Sanchez.
Or the alien from the Alien movies. Or
Shang-Chi.
Pretty much anything you can...
Loki.
Shang-Chi is in there now?
Probably. I think so. But, this is all to say that this giant amorphous thing with almost no real, well, with very limited style of its own. Like, the whole thing of Fortnite is that it can bite any style it wants. Grabbing that IP to put in Magic the Gathering is like, what are you even buying there?
Yeah.
I don't even know what that means. Is the banana guy going to be in it? I don't know.
It doesn't feel like there's anything iconic, because when I was in the Funko Pop business, I did not get the Funko Pops myself. I sold them. There were quite a surplus of Fortnite Funko Pops, and no one seemed to want them, because why would you? Exactly.
Because the part of Fortnite that makes it work is that it's a video game that is sold to children.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't know. But Magic, almost all of the things that were announced seemed like it was at a minimum 2 years too late. Lord of the Rings feels about a decade too late to ride that zeitgeist.
At least.
The cyberpunk stuff is about 2 years too late. The Street Fighter is about, 5-10 years since its cultural relevant peak, or its most recent peak from Street Fighter 4. Like 5 pretty much flopped. So a lot of this stuff feels desperate and like it's chasing an audience. The new Innistrad set seems well made, so they don't seem to be actively like ruining the gameplay as much anymore. So that's cool. The fact that the Lord of the Rings set is going to be modern legal, and almost every modern legal set that they've printed has invalidated almost all of the stuff that came before it, like Modern Horizons 1 and 2, completely flipped modern. So it will be very funny to me if the Lord of the Rings set comes out and flips modern on its head, and now you have to play with fucking Gimli if you want to do well.
Fucking Gandalf is broken and you have to deal with that for the rest of modern.
Yeah, I'm playing Lightning Bolt, Urza, and Gandalf the Grey.
Yeah.
And then we've got Warhammer 40k, which again, like, it's just a really anachronistic. It only makes sense because hobby shops tend to sell both of these things, but nothing about these two IPs mixes well.
Nope.
Like 40k is 40,000 years in the future. I mean, there are orcs, I guess. The tribes will be there. There are orcs in Eldar. Wait, is it Eldar? Those are the fake elves, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you get elves, you got orcs, you got all that stuff, but like, it's future guns and stuff, so I don't know. Like, Magic tends to veer away from that sort of thing. All of this feels desperate. It feels like they are trying to salt the earth as fast as they can to extract as much money out of this game as possible. And it's still doing well, so apparently people like me just don't matter enough for it to do anything. But, yep, still not going to play it.
And one other thing, there's now online exclusive cards. Which only work in their online
client.
What is it? Arena?
Yeah, in MTG Arena, Pete, they are releasing cards that only work in Arena because they want to add more like Hearthstone shit to the game.
Cool. Nice. Always like when I buy things and yet don't possess them.
Yeah.
That's always good. It's always good when you design one of the big selling points of Arena was that you could play this physical game online. It's always good when you're just like, actually, we're just going to do away with the physical thing because Arena's making too much money.
We're going to branch it, and now you can have some cards that do really wild things in, like, their constant state effects, where if you play this card, then it boosts another card forever, even if it goes to the graveyard or goes back to your hand. There's things that do, like, random effects, like it will just make a random card for you, and there's no way to do that in a paper format, stuff like that. So
it basically, if you wanted to get your Hearthstone or your Runeterra effects, your digital only card games, now Magic wants to do that. But the thing about those games is that they were always worse than Magic. Like, why are we doing this desperate shit? Whatever. It's fine. I'm sure that it will open up a great new design space that everyone will love. So now moving to my shout out, because I want to talk about something nice. My shout out for this week, my obsession of the week. Have either of y'all ever seen Billy on the Street?
Yes.
With Billy Eichner, right?
With Billy Eichner?
Yeah.
That show's fucking great. People should watch that show. I watched a bunch of it on Netflix back to back to back. It's a delight. What a good thing. Just Billy Eichner of Parks and Rec and the Lion King remake fame. Just running up to people on the streets of New York, accosting them, and asking them pop culture questions. And occasionally, they have celebrity guests. They do little games. It's just a good time. Good, wholesome fun. Without further ado, let's discuss G-String. Em, you pick G-String. Why don't you set us up? Give us the background of this game.
So, G-String is a single-player, first-person shooter, sci-fi game, which is primarily developed by one person, Eyaura, Eyaura, on Twitter. She designed this game over the course of 13 years. It originally was going to be a Half-Life 2 mod that then became its own standalone commercial product. It is about a Korean teenager, Mio Hiyori, as she is trying to escape what seems to be servitude in this really terrible cyberpunk future situation. She's fighting against militiamen, robots that are apparently sex bots that have gotten a virus, and then it's easier to just throw them in the trash or in the slums rather than reprogram them. Also, she has telekinetic and pyrotechnic powers, and can shoot a gun, which is the Half-Life formula. Running around shooting stuff and sometimes doing puzzles.
Yep, you are the gravity gun.
Yep.
And you can make a bullet, basically. Pyrokinesis is your kind of makeshift bullet before you get guns, and if you ever run out of bullets.
Yep.
You
doesn't seem
also
to be a problem.
You get a hammer instead of a crowbar.
Yes.
Yep.
That is true. But this game follows very much the Half-Life formula of nameless. Well, she's got a name. Main character has a name, but has no speaking parts. Just kind of wandering around the world. It's more organic level design. You don't really see like a beginning and end to the levels. You're kind of dropped into this space, and you are navigating around as best you can by kind of walking down corridors and pressing on everything until you find the way forward. And story kind of happens to you and around you, and it seems like characters imply intent on your part that doesn't feel like it is necessarily intentional. I found that when I was playing the game, I was simply doing the things I was doing because that was all I could do, and not so much because I felt like I was part of a resistance movement or something. So what did we think of playing like the first hour or so of G-String in terms of the world setting? So like, how did we feel about this cyberpunk dystopia?
It is always a dystopia. I've yet to play a single cyberpunk utopia. I mean, things are never going good in the sprawl. It's cyberpunk, so I mean, you pretty much know what you're getting. There are these vast corporations that control all natural resources, including apparently the air now. But there's also, this game relies on let's say three mechanics to the exclusion of many others. There's vents. You crawl through lots of vents. There are floor is lava sections. So you have to sort of jump around, between things. And the third one I basically call like extreme parkour almost. Like you walk up railings, you walk on real skinny ledges and things and hop between them. So I mean, eventually I got a little bored of climbing around vents. But when the game sort of opens up, like when you see these vast vistas and, the city proper, it is startlingly detailed. It's pretty beautiful at points.
Yeah, and I think that the moments where you get to soak in the scope of this, it's a cyberpunk future, so it's a giant city that encompasses maybe the whole, continent. We don't really know the boundaries of the big city that you're in, but those moments where you get the pullback are really the moments where this game shines and where the world building really filled in for me. What did we think of like the opening cutscene, like setting up this world?
Yeah.
Did you?
Let's start with the opening crawl, I guess, to set our scene. I could just read it if you want, or I could sum it up.
Go for it.
All right.
If it's not that long.
It's not terribly long. In the future, climate change and oil wars have devastated the Middle East, resulting in mass migration to Europe. Southeast Asia is largely underwater, with many of the flood refugees residing in the North American Union, the NAU. There are large permanent colonies on the Moon, Mars, and Jupiter's ice moon Europa. Anti-gravity is commonplace, and Internet 2 has formed. The population is under constant surveillance, and only electronic currency are allowed. Banks are burning, and everyone working in finances have become targets. Earth's atmosphere is toxic, and privately owned air refineries filter and redistribute breathable air. While AI becomes self-aware, the biotech industry tackles immortality. Many people are awakening, their DNA somehow changing. You, Mio Hiyori from the Koreas, are one of them. And then it trails off there. And that's where our opening scene starts.
Yeah.
With
you in like a little cell, kind of breaking out and going through basic training, pretty much.
Yep.
It's all the apocalypses, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's global warming, climate change, natural disaster, finance breaks down, like AI run amok, human-animal hybrids, pick your favorite. But they're just going to toss them all in there.
It is really a cyberpunk gumbo.
Yeah. I mean, if things are going to go down like that, it feels like it would be a domino effect of some sort. But goddamn, this is grim, even for cyberpunk, I think.
Is Cyberpunk Gumbo a band or a game name?
That would be a good band name.
It would be. What sort of music would it be?
House.
Chiptunes.
Chiptunes wouldn't be bad. Listeners, write in, let us know whether Cyberpunk Gumbo plays house music, EDM.
Trap,
that'd be pretty good. Country. Country, but we've got a synth. Man, trap, that'd be pretty good. Well, sorry. But yeah, this game grabs every cyberpunk, or a bunch of cyberpunk tropes, and throws them into one thing. And it doesn't focus in on any one too specifically. It tries to incorporate all of them in equal degrees. And I think that's to varying success. It's sometimes a bit hard to focus in on one critique when you've got a lot of things going on. And unlike a game like Cloudpunk, which we've played this year, or Umurangi Generation, which is also another kind of cyberpunk game we've played in the last year, those games either focus their train on capitalism as like the root cause, or kind of environmental degradation. Like they tried to train in on one thing. Like Umurangi was focused more on the environment. Cloudpunk was focused more on the financial system and how it had its claws in everything. This game, because it is told in a first-person perspective through a character who's mostly, like most of the game is, like you said, Pete, crawling through vents and shooting dudes. I found it hard to get the critique as concisely as those other games.
Cloudpunk also had the advantage of putting you in the shoes of basically a taxi driver, a courier, yes. I guess. And the courier is not going to tear down the system from within. Unfortunately, in this case, you're playing a super soldier. So I mean, you basically have to make a radical change to the existing regime in virtue of your psionic powers.
Yeah, and that's definitely something you are the most empowered actor that we see in this game for the most part, especially the folks that are not the direct antagonists. But because you are a silent protagonist, it's hard to know why you're doing anything other than what people project on you. So you kind of, you wake up in a cell. You get ushered out to do some psionic training to prove that you can move things with your mind and blow things up with fire. It's kind of a tutorial section. And then the facility that you're in gets struck by debris from a space battle above the Earth. And that debris basically lets you free. It breaks you out of your cell and allows you to kind of go off on a Half-Life 2-esque adventure. Have either of you played Half-Life 2?
I have not.
I have. Probably not in a decade, I would say. But
yeah, that's about when I last played it. And how did you feel this game stacked up? Because it seemed not stacks up in terms of quality or anything like that, but in terms of the gameplay style, how directly do you think it translates?
Let's see. Well, it has been a while, so as far as I can tell, it's pretty close. Like, you are still running around, doing your crouch walk through vents and that sort of thing. As far as the actual level design goes, Half-Life 2 is a much more, I don't want to get too critical because we'll have time for that.
Yeah, I mean, this was a game, we said it at the outset, it's a game made by one person over 13 years.
Yeah.
12 or 13 years. Like, it's...
So,
we're going to be critical in spots of what we played, but you have to keep in mind, the fact that this was made at all is staggering. The fact that the scope is what it is staggering. Some of the vistas that we've spoken about, like, there are legitimately strong moments in this game. Mm-hmm. But there are definitely pitfalls that we all fell into, and we are going to talk about this game like it's a game. We will have some positive and some negative. We are not saying these things to be mean. We are trying to inform you, the listener, of our experience in playing it. So, disclaimer over.
Yes. So in something like Half-Life, you have a team where there are people who are designing levels, there are people who designing assets, and this was all one person doing it. So there's quite a variety of like the puzzles that you're going through, as well as the actual environments that you are traveling through. It's very much a like poke around and see what works kind of game, where sometimes you will be stuck for a little while, not knowing like what particular box you need to move, or what the necessary step is in order to progress. So in something like Half-Life, it's very much a linear progression, and this one is kind of also linear, but less clear about the direction it wants you to take. I didn't feel like in Half-Life 2 I was ever lost. Like, if I followed the straight path, that would usually lead me in the direction that I wanted to go. But when we get into some levels here, it ends up being very, something that you have to try and fail quite a bit. I remember one portion where there was a courtyard area, probably one of the first open areas that I found. And then I would, have no idea which way to go forward, so I would check every door, but every door you go up to says it's locked. I would, jump down into this pit that was in the middle and fall to my death. And then I found out that you had to actually like climb up this singular beam that was leading up to a second level, and that's how you actually made progress. So it was a little esoteric at times.
Yeah,
and
there were
also,
also, sorry to interrupt, there were
Go
weird
ahead.
moments where you had to wait for environmental stuff to happen.
mm-hmm.
Like,
That
you're
was what I was
trapped until you... Oh, I'm sorry to steal your point, Em. Please continue.
No, you got it.
Okay. Yeah, there are points where you just have to look out the window and be like, oh, space debris is falling again, or like an atom bomb's being dropped.
Yeah.
Better wait for that to happen, and then I'll go through this door.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's one moment early on where you reach a like landing, and there's a window to your side, and the door at the end of the hall will not open, and then it says something over your headset or whatever you have that's like space debris falling, and then you can watch as this like streak comes out of the sky and crashes very close to you, and that's what actually opens the way forward. But for probably like 30 seconds to a minute, you're just standing there wondering which way you're supposed to go. And as far as the actual like impact literally of that moment is very effective, but having us wait for it to happen kind of took me out of it a little bit.
Yeah,
You can
the
say
trick. Oh, go ahead.
the same thing about the A-bomb, too. Later on, you're standing on a rooftop, and an atom bomb hits in the distance. You can hear screams,
Yeah.
too. Honestly, it's an equally gorgeous and horrifying moment, but again, it's just sort of like forcing you to stand there and watch it before you can progress is kind of annoying.
And like having you take damage because of the atomic bomb being dropped, like the fact that you could see that sequence, and then if you're low on life, you just die. Like there's some moments where the gameplay and the storytelling definitely clash because of stuff like that. I just found that like the trick that Valve pulls off in games like Half-Life 2 and Portal 2, kind of the heyday of Valve first-person design, is that they managed to make a world that looks organic, but actually there's only one path, and there aren't actually multiple paths to try, even though there are other paths that are implied. The gameplay will not allow you to go down the wrong paths, or they will highlight the right path via usually a light. There will usually be a light over a platform.
The lighting is very effective to keep you going in the right direction. If you see a light, generally heading that way in a Half-Life game will get you where you want to go.
Yeah, there's usually a light. Maybe they'll use a breadcrumb with enemies, so the enemies will kind of guide you in the right direction. There'll be stuff that looks like you should be able to reach it, but Gordon can't jump there, or there's something that's gating you, like truly preventing you from going in the wrong direction. G-String has very dense environments. Like you said, it's maybe like an hour before you're really in a courtyard, like an actual open courtyard. And so because of how dense it is, you're moving through apartments, you're moving through subterranean structures, you're moving through sometimes sewers, office buildings. Like, it's very claustrophobic with a lot of doors to try and a lot of unintuitive level layouts. Like, sometimes the correct answer is to fall through a hole in the floor, and then, you're able to progress by blowing up a bookcase, and then there's a duct behind the bookcase. Like, stuff like that happens all the time in this game. And usually you'll stumble upon those things after you've opened like 5 different doors. You've tried going upstairs, going downstairs, and it just leads to a lot of moments where I felt lost, because I would get to a point that felt like the game was funneling me in a direction, only to hit a dead end and find out that the correct thing to do was like to jump 3 ledges and then jump over a fence.
One of the things I learned is actually where the game originated from. Like, it was originally architectural study maps that AO was working on for Half-Life 2 that then became a conversion mod. So the fact that there's a lot of like these like apartment buildings is what you're going through for a majority. Sewer systems is a lot of it as well. The fact that we get a lot of those, like, and we can almost fully explore them, even though it doesn't lend itself to the actual, like, forward progression of the narrative, is kind of telling to the origins of where it came from. But as far as the actual playing of the game, close some of those doors, please, because I'm going to try everything. And it's a lot of noise. It's a very noisy game, and not like the audio sense. Although there's a lot of like, you know, screams and barking and things like that.
And moaning.
Yeah, like a lot of whoever worked on the sound design for this game was on the ball. It might have been Aya herself, but as far as the like noise of the game goes, there's like wallpapers on every surface. Some are like sunflowers or trees, or it's very busy. And the fact that you have no idea what the right avenue is to go down only makes it more confusing whenever you come across this like randomly decorated room, which is interesting, but my ADHD.
It definitely had a bunch of sections that felt too detailed to be the wrong path, and then in fact they were in a lot of spots. And I will say, like, when I first booted this game up, had a bug where I basically saw nothing but wireframes. Very few things were actually rendered properly, and I played that way for about a half hour. And the reason why I did it was because when I looked up a video walkthrough, because I was like, at first I thought it was a stylized decision for everything to be wireframes. I was like, oh, okay, we're going really minimalist. And then when I looked up what the game was supposed to look like, I was like, oh, okay, I just have a bug. And before I fixed it, I was playing with it this way because the geometry of the levels, when seen in wireframe, I could see through the walls and everything, and I could see where there would be more geometry because of the wireframes. And I was like, oh, the correct pathway is probably just following where the geometry is.
And that actually worked for you for a while?
I got to, you know that big corridor you were talking about? Like that big open space with the hole in the ground?
Okay.
I got to that. And beat that combat encounter, and then was basically stuck because the beam, I think, was like one wire or like two wires, and I had no reason to think. Because there's actually quite a bit of geometry down the hole. I was like, oh, maybe we need to go down. And I just kept dying, and it got frustrating. So that's when I turned the bug off. But that was like my way of navigating, was just, okay, well, which part of this world has more geometry? Because there's a bunch of red herring doors and, you know, stuff like that, and I could tell which ones were dead ends. But that's not good. Like, it's...
If you can see the entire matrix to actually know where you're supposed to go. Yeah,
seeing the matrix let me know where to go, but that meant that I didn't get any of the ambiance, which is what this game does well. I think it's the game's strongest point, is the world building and the set pieces. So what did we think of these different kind of these different cyberpunk elements? So we've got like these robots. I think probably the strongest part of the game is when you go to the robot ghetto, which is kind of one of the first sections. Pete, what did you think of that section?
Yeah, it's very sort of Neuromancer-esque, right? So Bill Gibson is basically the father of cyberpunk, and his book Neuromancer is all about these sort of rogue AIs and the idea that they sort of, you know, emerge and take their own place and try to live their own lives in society. It's an interesting twist here because they basically said, like, look, you can stay in your little area, but, you know, we're going to keep you self-contained. You have to live here. And then basically the AI makes it a decent argument. It's like, look, we're just doing what any living organism would do to survive. You know, the sort of question being, okay, you know, are you living or not? I agree. It's sort of the most interesting part of the game. The rest of it is basically like a sort of Star Wars bring down the Empire deal.
Yeah, and there's some enemies that even kind of sound vaguely Darth Vader-ish or vaguely, you know, Emperor-ish. But like this section where you're basically fighting mostly robots, and a lot of the robots are either geishas or sex bots, and that is different.
The sex robots.
Yeah, they moan when you kill them.
They do, and they're very sort of like hippie. They have a very swishy walk as they come towards you.
Yeah, I never got attacked by these robots. They never got close enough to hit me. I assume they can kill you.
They kind of like bump into you or swing their arms a little bit, but it takes a while if your health is full.
Yeah, so like there's this rogue AI that is kind of pleading with you to not kill the robots. She's like, you're killing my friends, stop it. But the game, like the rogue AI raises a good point about, look, we just want to live, we just want to exist, why can't we exist? You humans aren't stupid. Like you knew when you created us that eventually we would get smart enough to, I guess, balk at the role you've created for us. Why can't you just let us, you know, exist? Why do you have to snuff us out? And this game doesn't allow for the space for the main character to be compelled by this. The only way forward is to kill the AI.
Why does, I mean, this might be an unanswerable question, but why does the main character want to kill the AI?
That's the thing, is like there's no good reason, I don't think. Like the main character, you're moving into the AI space, you're killing the robots because they're enemies that will kill you if you don't kill them. You are opposed to the main, I guess they're NATO. Like the forces that are trying to kill the robot are the same people who are trying to kill you. And so I found no really compelling reason why you would give a shit about the AI.
If anything, you should ally with it. Like there seems to be a natural synergy here between you, who were sort of turned into this weapon and confined by the Empire, and this AI who has been similarly oppressed by the Empire.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's hard to say if there was a, like, the AI will kill everyone plot line, because this game, similar to Half-Life 2, all of the dialogue, outside of a handful of cutscenes, most of the dialogue is just people talking at you over comms or over videos. Occasionally there'll be a person in your space who talks to you, but if you don't have subtitles on and you're not paying attention 100% of the time, and some of this stuff can happen while you're in combat or while you're exploring, like your mind is in other places, it's easy to miss some of these plot beats.
It also has a problem similar to like some of the more narrative-driven games that we played, like After Party or the one before that, Oxenfree, where if something else happens while you are trying to read the subtitles, it will cut off that line of dialogue. So I had a lot of times where I would stumble into a conversation with like a screen or something, and then I would like shoot my gun, and then that one sound, because I had the closed captioning on, would then just get rid of the entire thing of dialogue. So that was pretty rough, especially when it's like a very long chunk that's probably giving me some, like, maybe not important to the overall, like, escape the city narrative. Like, I kind of want to know more about the world that we're in, just because I'm in it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of radio advertisements as well. Like, you guys probably ran into a lot of the same ones that I did.
A lot of pro-euthanasia ones.
Yeah, that was the one that, like, really stuck with me because it's so freaky. It's like no questions asked, euthanasia. If you're under 16, you need parental consent, but we'll work with you if you can't get that. Like, come on down.
Like, fudge your age a little bit, it'll be fine.
Yeah, it's all right. You know,
We're all friends here.
If you don't have a will, then your assets go back to the government, and yeah, it's all right.
The one that got me was one of the sex robot ones. It was basically like, look, these are malfunctioning and killing people, but we'll offer you a rebate, so don't worry about it.
We'll give you 20% off the next one.
Exactly.
There was an ad at one point that said, sex with synthetics is preferred, but if you do have sex with a biological being, remember to use protection.
Yeah, it's like 1 kid is okay, 2 kids is getting iffy, and then 3 kids, we're going to arrest you.
Yes. 1 is okay, 2 is the limit, and 3 is illegal.
Yeah.
I would, just while we're talking about the creepy geisha sex robots, I found myself wondering, and I don't know if either of you know the answer, you can enlighten me, what feminist theory might think about sex robots. So, like, I don't know if it'd be considered, like, liberating or, like, still misogynistic, like, in its way, because, you know, they're built to look like women. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I would lean towards it being. I mean, this world is overwhelmingly misogynistic.
Oh, absolutely,
like,
absolutely.
There's most of the vending machines sell used panties.
Yeah.
But I would say that because the sex robots are all female coded, I think it's maybe if there were gigolo robots, it would be more even-handed. But this game clearly is just using it as a critique on a misogynist society.
So sort of like the idea of like a feminine form is necessarily subservient, submissive, sexual. I get it. Yeah, mm-hmm. I see your logic there, Gino.
Give me a gigolo pod. That's what I'm saying.
Not a lot of variety there.
No, there's 2 sex robots that I could tell. Maybe 3 models. You run into them all the time. And, I mean, the enemies in this game, there are soldiers with guns. They have either pistols or, like, machine guns. There are turret drones, a la Half-Life or Portal. You know, if you knock it over, it shoots a bunch and then dies. There are fucking floating drones that, like, slowly float up to you and then explode when they get close to you. And those things suck shit.
Yeah.
Because they're very quiet. And that'll cost you a lot of progress if they sneak up on you. There's some floating drones that don't seem to just explode. But, yeah, I think those are all the enemy types. Oh, there's a weird slug monster.
I was going to say, there are also weird slug monsters that are, like, sort of stupid strong and only show up for, like, 20 minutes.
Yeah, and I guess speaking of, like, slug monsters and weird stuff, there's also a David Lynch quality to some of this game as well. Like, you encounter some flesh creatures that, like, take you to a flesh hallucination. There are spots where you just kind of wake up in a mansion, like in a house, like the Red Room in Twin Peaks. What did we think of those segments? Pete, did you have any takeaway?
I mean, God, I tried to sort of incorporate them into the larger narrative. My only thought was that it's an artifact of her training. Like, this is either something she encountered and suppressed, or like something they did to her mind that's bringing this on. But like, there really is. First off, I couldn't understand a lot of the things the sort of like echoey, you know, God voice told me, but I really couldn't reconcile it. As it was creepy and disturbing. I mean, that part was cool, but I don't know.
Yeah, that segment felt like it was inspired by David Lynch, and then much like David Lynch, there's maybe not a good answer for what it's doing there.
Yeah, I think I know what's happening. Based entirely on what happens at the very end of the game, so spoilers for the end of the game, eventually you end up in that red room area, and it's implied that your parents, who died in the flood, which appears to be the like flooding of the world, they're like sitting in the chairs, and the spooky voice is like, "Oh, it took you a while to get here, but now you can hang out." And so it seems to be implied this is like some afterlife situation, which, you know, it seems par for the course for this kind of very cerebral experience that you're having.
That would fit. Doesn't explain the flesh bobs on the floor.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of those.
Yeah. Yeah, this game has a lot of stuff going on. It's really trying to do a lot of things, and I guess some of this just kind of raises the question, like, when you're on a solo project for this long, there's really not necessarily, unless you're really working with people and getting testers from outside, it might be hard to edit down and to scope. And this game is about 6 or 7 hours if you mainline it and you know where you're going. And for a project worked on by one person, and like just some of the vistas alone in terms of assets and rigging and setting up everything so that it looks natural, just creating those shots would take a person weeks. Like the scope of all this stuff, like there's a gameplay transition at the end of the game. Like there's a bunch of stuff in this game that had to bump up the scope significantly. And I can't help but feel that if an editor or some other folks were just involved in the project, even not contributing, just like trimming or helping steer, we might have gotten a more concise work in the end. Yeah.
Like, someone was talking about a TV show. I don't remember which one. It's not relevant, but they were saying how if it had like a little bit more of a couple of passes, then it would have worked out some of these narrative contrivances. And I feel like you need that whenever you're working on a project, especially a big one like this, where you are kind of in your own head and you can work on really impressively scaled levels, honestly. And it gets to a point where you need to sort of understand your own mental process as you're making it is not going to match up to the players who are playing it. So whenever you have something like, the most basic example is like, I need to bring the key to the door to unlock the door. If you are putting that behind certain barriers in your game design, then the players need to make that logical leap as well. This is like the adventure game situation with the chicken and the pulley.
Yeah, the rubber chicken with a pulley in the middle.
Exactly. Where maybe that made sense to someone and it's like, haha, funny joke. But no one in their right mind is going to like jump to that right off the bat. It's kind of the same thing where if you want them to spend a lot of time in your game and like explore every avenue, then they can do that. But you also need to signal like where the end is. Like, if you want to explore, you can do that, but this is where you need to go if you want to keep going. And a lot of like playtesting and such, that is where you work out a lot of this, which is usually done with your team. So if you have someone who's working on the level design and someone who's working on the assets, then there is a collaborative experience to actually putting everything together. Then you can have an easier time of picking out like, this is maybe too much. Maybe we spend way too long in the sewer level, as most games tend to do, just because you can make a lot of it very fast. Yeah, it'll work itself out usually. I believe this game had a beta that came out about 4 years before the actual release, and a lot of it got changed after that as sort of people played it and some things got clarified, but it could have used some more passes.
Yeah, I think that there are sections of this game that you could cut out and it would just do the game a favor. Like, there are long combat stretches and navigation stretches that if they just weren't there, and you could focus in on like the pyramid of the air refining pyramid, the robot ghetto, the section in space, like if you could just focus in on those set pieces we talked about, when you see the cityscape, when you get above ground, the bomb. Like, if this was a 4-hour game or a 3-hour game instead of a 6-hour game, I think it would be better for it. There's just too much exploration and combat kind of padding between the levels. And I think that it also kind of hurts because it's hard to keep in your brain all of the conversations you've had, because the conversations happen so intermittently. You're really exposed to combat and world building and kind of, the environmental storytelling much more than the direct plot. And so it makes the plot hard to follow, because, the game doesn't really repeat stuff that much. And usually I don't like repeating, but in this case, like, because there's so little connective tissue between these story beats, it's hard to piece together what's even happening sometimes. Like, you meet some villains who are just like wearing helmets, and you might see their name if you have closed captioning, but it's very easy to be like, is this the same person? Is this a different person with a similar outfit? There are only a handful of voice actors in this game, so it's hard to know if this is just, is this a stormtrooper and this is how stormtroopers sound, or is this a named character? And those sorts of questions I found cropping up pretty regularly. Is this a Resistance member, or is this a guy I've run into before? Yeah. Any other kind of closing thoughts on G-String? Like, I think... Oh, go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to sort of talk about cyberpunk in general right now. Like, we played a lot of cyberpunk games over, the past, I don't know, decades. We've been doing this podcast. And I feel like at this point, cyberpunk as a social critique has sort of run its course. Like, I don't necessarily know that the problems we're now facing as a society and in our future can really be addressed through the whole sort of like console cowboy hacker in the system, these massing, sprawling, technological cities anymore. Like, they're still interesting, but I think they've lost their social currency,
Yeah. I feel like either it's too apt or it's going to be way more mundane than this, like, oh, there's, a sex robot you can rent out at every corner situation. I feel like our cyberpunk future is probably going to suck. It's not going to be like Blade Runner. It's going to be like this, except probably going to have drones watching us or something. So I feel like we're at a point where we're living it a little too much for it to be comfortable.
Yeah, a bunch of the things that you read off from the beginning of this game, I was like, oh yeah, that happened. That's happening. And being prescient is, it's a currency to a certain degree, but I don't know. Like, I didn't know what I was supposed to take away from this game's critique. Like, it's bad. Things are bad and seem to be going in this direction, but what we should do to avoid it or how we avoid it, Super Soldier saves us?
Yeah, that's the risk of dramatizing, like, what is actually our present dystopic reality, right? Like, the solution is, reasonable commonplace reforms to our economic and production system, not, launching a fighter jet to blow up the air refinery.
Yeah. Yeah, the answer in this game is have a super soldier go on a one-woman rampage. And even that, it seems like it's ambiguous whether you've made a big difference by the end. So yeah, any closing thoughts? Any other things we want to touch on? I don't understand why every single cyberpunk thing has to have Japanese in it. Why they all have to be heavily Japanese themed.
I can help a little bit.
Okay, because your suit in this game talks to you in Japanese when you're hurt, and it confused the hell out of me.
So I think you can lay most of this at the feet of two people. One is William Gibson, who I've already mentioned, and the other one is Neil Stevenson. So like both of these two guys are sort of the fathers, grandfathers, whatever you want to say, the progenitors of cyberpunk. And William Gibson especially really, really loved Japan. Like, I don't know that I can necessarily say exactly why, but I could say Neuromancer was written in the 1980s, 1984. So this was sort of in the days when America was very worried about Japan's rise to economic power, I'm pretty sure. There's a whole days of Toyota management, American businesses are studying how Japan does all this. So he crammed a whole bunch of Japan in his cyberpunk universe, and because he was the first guy, everybody basically took from him. And Neil Stevenson crammed even more Japan into his cyberpunk stories, and I think it's just become sort of a trope from there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then that's how you end up with geisha sex robots and your suit speaking to you in Japanese and katakana and hiragana being all over the walls and spots.
Mm-hmm.
When the going back to the Magic the Gathering Kamigawa coming back situation showed up, someone called it something like Neo-Orientalism, where it's this weird fetishized version of Japanese culture that is it's pretty gross. It doesn't actually reflect actual Japanese culture, but it is this far off thing that we can pretend is, we can put some neon on it and then not feel as bad about appropriating all these things. Yeah,
I mean, it's riffing on Blade Runner or riffing on other cyberpunk works. It's just at this point we are 40 years, 50 years removed from Blade Runner, and so now it just feels like every time we echo this forward, it becomes more and more trope, less and less commentary.
Yeah,
the weird thing about Blade Runner too, 1982, so just under 40 years. The weird thing about Blade Runner is that there isn't, if I recall, so much sort of neo-Orientalism in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the novel on which it's based. That's sort of more like noir thriller. But I'd have to reread it to be sure. So that's sort of maybe a decision they made because it looked more futuristic and exotic on screen, which, carries its whole own set of implications.
Yeah, definitely. And
I actually have that right next to me right now. I was going to pick it up, but next time I'll have a book report.
Yeah, it's a good book.
Yeah, so I've heard.
All right, well, I think that's it for G-String.
Oh, I do.
Unless you have something.
I do like one of the sequences, it's 6 hours in the game, but it's one of the very last things you do. You actually go on a little fighter pilot mission. I actually really liked the controls for that, and thought it was a good take on the old Star Wars, fighter X-Wing thing that they had in arcades. It's a shame that in order to get to it, you have to go through a lot of dark hallways and sewer systems, but it's one of the best places I think it could have ended, and then I think you die at the end. Spoilers. Do Do you guys have the same take on that ending?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
screen goes white.
You explode, right?
Yeah.
And then, okay. I wasn't sure if that was the note that it ended on, but that was my interpretation. And that makes me even sadder about this game, because you did all that and then you died.
Yeah, and I think that the fighter pilot cut to a completely different gameplay style, very cool, but I can only imagine what that took
Oh yeah.
to
That
do.
It's not easy building that in,
Source
Half-Life
engine.
Source, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, man, like that section is very cool. It's just the cost, the human
Yeah.
cost. And I mean, you actually shared like the article, the blog post by the developer of this game, Aora, kind of talking about the reception of it. And it looks like, I mean, it hasn't earned very much from what I can tell from Steam's financial, like whatever you can glean from Steam's sales. And I guess it's just hard to talk about this game because I think it has promise in a lot of spots. I think it has a lot of good moments, but it is overdone, and it clearly went off the rails in some spots in terms of the scoping. And like these are just problems that you run into when you start a project when you're young, and you haven't done much development. And in most cases, someone's first or one of their first projects just doesn't see the light of day.
Yeah.
You
It
know,
is amazing that this got made at all, because most people would have given up on this after maybe a year, maybe 2 years. But to go 13 years of just churning out stuff on it is, frankly, a once in a lifetime thing, I think. And it's probably not good for your mental health or your physical health or anything, because when it comes down to it, it's possibly going to be a thankless result.
Yeah, I mean, when this game started development, it would have been a fresh idea.
Yeah.
It came out a month after Cyberpunk 2077. Like a lot of this actually became kind of on trend because of how long it took to come out. But by the time it came out into a world where this game that a AAA studio invested a ton of money into had salted the earth of Cyberpunk.
Mm-hmm.
Like it soaked up all the oxygen. And when you're working on a project for this long, like you don't know what the world's going to look like when you release it.
Yeah.
Like when this game started development, Half-Life 2 was a much beloved project. Valve was in a different place. Like I think the Orange Box was pretty contemporary with this, like when this started development. But the world is just in a very different place. Shooters don't play like this anymore, for the most part. Like this design felt really dated in some spots. The engine itself is dated. Like you can only do so much with the graphics from there. And then just what was kind of unmined territory and prescient, if it had come out, 9 years ago, now it's just a very different context, and so much of it was sunk cost at that point that I don't know. I'm glad this game came out. I think there are a lot of good lessons to take from it. I think that it's worth checking out if you liked Half-Life 2 and you want to play a game in that style. Or if, any of the things we've talked about in terms of the storytelling rings true with you. But I have a hard time recommending this, wholeheartedly, sight unseen, unless you have some of those preconditions.
Yeah. If you want a very gritty experience in more than just like the grunge of the environments that you're going through, this is a game to check out. It's not terribly expensive. I think it's under $20. And if you're, I think, working in game development, there's a lot of lessons that you can glean from like a project like this, just because of like, if you are considering going really deep in your own stuff, you might want a actual example of like spending 13 years on a project and then, you know, maybe it doesn't sell as well as you want it to or something. So, you know, have someone to sort of critique your stuff as you go along, play test it along the way. These are all valuable lessons for anyone who's making games, and I'm sure that if Aya does put out something else, it's gonna learn a lot. I don't know. She's working on actually like a motion picture is what she's calling it. I'm not sure what it's actually going to be, but it is based on seems like it's based on the experience of what's her name? What's the main character's? Jodie is
Mio?
Mio's girlfriend.
Mio.
Jodie. She with the flood, she is presumed dead. And it seems like it's going to be a prequel that's exploring what happens before that, which, if it's going to have the environments and the setting of this world, it's going to be really interesting, and you will not have to play it, which is, I think, a major drawback of this one.
Yeah, and again, the amount of work done here in terms of asset generation, camera work, just, you know, different game design styles, or I should say gameplay styles. There's so much craft that went into this thing, and clearly learning as they went. But I think a lot of this would have just been better had it, you know, been cut down and trimmed in spots. But yeah, G-String. Check it out if any of this stuff, you know, seemed appealing. And if you haven't had enough cyberpunk, this is more of it. So with that, I think it is now my turn to pick once again. And I know both of you have no idea what I'm going to pick.
No, I think it'll be a surprise to everyone.
I think it's going to be a surprise to everyone, because, you know, it's you know, it's been a hot few weeks of games coming out. A bunch of games have come out, and, you know, it's been a pretty good year for games. Psychonauts 2. I'm picking Psychonauts 2. The second Psychonauts.
Okay. Did we ever do the first?
We did. It was our second podcast.
Okay.
Is this a popular one? Have people heard of this one?
Psychonauts 2 or Psychonauts 1?
Yes. The Psychonauts series. Is
it popular?
Popular?
No, not really.
Universe.
Is there a Psychonauts universe to know of?
There is
Movies?
now. There's the first video game, which was a cult classic. Then there was Psychonauts: The Rhombus of Ruin, which was a VR PlayStation exclusive that set up.
I actually didn't know about this.
Say no more.
That set up Psychonauts 2, because I don't know. I think Double Fine was screwing around with VR technology and probably wanted some money to, you know, go towards Psychonauts 2. And then there's Psychonauts 2, which came out a few weeks ago. I have been waiting for this game for 16 or so years, and I've started playing it already. It's very good so far, and I am excited to talk about it some more. It is out on Xbox Game Pass. If either of you have an Xbox One, you can just get it for free. If you do not, it is a new game.
Gotcha.
And it is out on PS4 and 5 as well, and on PC. So, a variety of ways to play Psychonauts 2.
Count me in. I liked the first one.
Yeah, and it's it refined the first one from what I can see so far.
Wow. Okay.
The controls are tighter. Hopefully this one ends with a level that was play tested.
Wait, did the first one not?
They ran out of time and budget for the last level, so the last level is just very clearly got less playtesting than the rest of the game. Like, there's a big platforming section that's a real bummer to play, and like it's got technical glitches here and there too.
I can't believe they were working linearly so that their last level was the one that got shafted.
There's quite a bit about Psychonauts 1 that I'm pretty sure, as a developer, if you like looked into the processes of how that game got made, you would shake your head.
Probably. Well, I'll
But
go back.
Psychonauts 2.
I'll listen to our what was it? Our second episode. When we
Our second episode.
played Psychonauts 1. I'll listen to that. See what you had to say.
Yeah, so this game just came out. I'm looking forward to talking about it. And also just a programming note, for those who are following the Final Fantasy podcast, the next Final Fantasy we'll be covering is 6. So look forward to that.
That's a
as
good
well.
one.
Yep. Finally, we got some good Final Fantasies.
No more of this Brave
15.
Exodus 15.
15 spin-offs and straight to phone games and all sorts of stuff. We're getting 6. One that might actually get the top spot. Finally.
If
So,
Gino lets it.
we'll see. I haven't played 6 all the way through before, so it might win me over. Who's to say? So thank you, M.
Thank you. Tried something different. And sometimes doesn't take a shine to it, but tried it at least.
Thank you, Pete.
Yep. An interesting game with some very sort of obvious flaws, but an incredible achievement for any one person to make.
Of course. And thank you, listeners. You can get in touch with us at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. You can support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens. Till next time, peace!